Hey, this is another video about using the Arduino with TouchDesigner. In the earlier video, I showed how you can get the two to talk back and forth to each other. In this one, I wanted to show how you can deal with some unexpected data that's coming from a sensor. So if we look on this Adafruit page, I kind of just noticed this while I was opening it. It's showing the problem right here that we have. The hand in this video is slowly going away from the sensor, and it looks like it's pretty steadily going up, but then occasionally you get like an 85 in there. So that's kind of common with this sensor. It just kind of throws out some really high numbers. Sometimes it throws out a 0. So we're going to see if we can deal with that. And I think I'm going to try and deal with that in TouchDesigner rather than the Arduino. So maybe what I just want is the value to come over from the Arduino. So I've already installed the HCSR04 library. And if I go under examples, I'll see they have a simple example here that should just spit out the values on the serial port. So I've already set it up to be trigger pin on 5 and echo pin on 6. And if I upload this to the Arduino, we should just see those coming across on the serial monitor. So there they are. I'm kind of sitting away from the sensor. I'll kind of put my hand in front of it, move it closer and closer. And these are numbers in centimeters. I'm keeping my hand still, and we'll see if we get any crazy number out of nowhere. Well, you know, I wasn't moving it, and all of a sudden it went from 5 to 10. So normally what you see though is like a really high number out of nowhere, like 80 or 100 or something. Maybe not 100, but high numbers. So it's hard to see here. So maybe what we'll do is just close the serial monitor and change this just a little bit so the serial plotter will work. And to do that, you just print instead of print line and just say, we'll call it D with a colon. And if it's in that format, a variable name with a colon and then a number afterward, we should be able to see that show up in the serial plotter over here. So I'm uploading it to the Arduino. And if I hit the serial plotter, I can see a graph of what the data that's coming across. The only trick is that it scales, so it's hard to follow. But yeah, you can see some spikes though, and I'm not really moving, so that's not a good sign. So let's see how we can deal with that. I'm going to hit stop and close this. I'm just going to go back to what we had where it's just sending a number and a new line. So that's what print line does. It's just each one of these values will appear as a number on its own line. I'm going to upload that to the Arduino again. And if I just wanted to verify that it's still working, I can open the serial monitor, and that seems okay. So I'm just going to quit the Arduino. I'm done with this. I'm not even going to save it. It's a very simple program. So in TouchDesigner, I'm going to go through the same thing that I did before. I'm going to use a serial DAT, and it creates a little script that goes along with it. Anytime some data is received, I'll call this function. Let's see if we can get it to show up first of all. So changing the port to port 5, we can see the numbers appearing here. And I'm just going to change this script. So I've did the little viewer active button here, and I'm going to change it so that it is actually doing something with the value that's coming in. So message is actually, well, that's the message. It's a number. It's actually coming over as a string with a new line at the end. So we will have to change it into an actual number. But what I wanted to do here, and it's the same thing I did before, is I just made a text DAT to hold that one single number, that most recent number that came in. So I'll address that text1 DAT by just saying op, in parentheses, I will put text1. And I want to set its text equal to the message that's coming in. So let's take a look at this. If I click out here, there it is. The only issue is that this is not actually a number. It's a string with a new line at the end. And so I do want to change this to a float, which I should be able to do by just putting float in there. That'll change the actual text of that number to an actual floating point number. So now at this point, I should be able to do a DAT to chop. And I see there's the number. And it doesn't look quite right because this is not a decimal number. And I think what it's doing is it's considering this to be the name of the channel. So the first column is the value. So there we go. Now we're getting something better. Yeah, that's fine. So you can see as I put my hand forward, it gets smaller. Take my hand away, and the number gets bigger. But we've got the same problem. If I look at a trail chop, let's see. Trail? Okay. Always hard to find these things. So we can see that the value is kind of going up and down. Even though I'm holding my hand steady, I'll see some spikes happen all of a sudden. Okay, so that's what we want to adjust. And, this scaling is really kind of annoying. It can't really tell us because when it scales, it looks like there's a huge jump, but actually it may just be a minor one because the scale is changing so much. So what I can do is turn on Viewer Active, right click on this, and change Vertical Adapt so it doesn't change. But I do want to make sure I get all the possible values. So maybe let's try like a 0 to 100 range. That should get all of the possibilities, 0 to 100 centimeters, right? So let me just move this over and make it a little bigger maybe. Okay. So now what we need is to see if we can put something in between here to actually turn this into something that's less wild. So I'm going to try and put a couple of different things in here and see what they look like. So I'm going to insert a lag and we'll see what that does. So as I put my hand in front of here, you can see that what it does is it adds a slope. So instead of going sharply, and you can see it either here in the trail or you can see it here, but it kind of, instead of jumping from one value to another when I put my hand in front and move it, it kind of has like a slope to it. So that's not exactly what we want, but it's useful to know that that's a thing. We can also change the values here to change how it reacts. It does seem to be doing something, right? It's less agitated, so that maybe that's good enough. But let's try something else. So I'm gonna get rid of that, and maybe I will add a different operator, which is analyze. So this one, we can do things like get the average, and that does seem to be also maybe reducing the amount of jitter, but we have other options here. So other ones might help as well. So there's some experimenting we can do there. I think probably the one that's going to work best is filter. I choose filter here. What I get is I do get that slope again, but you can see that it also kind of dampens any kind of spurious numbers that are coming up just by nature of me moving my hand around and seeing that it's actually not, there are no spikes there. So this one seems like a good one. And of course, there are other ways that you can do this. And actually, there's one called despike here as a type. And that seems like it should be kind of the one that we want if we're trying to get rid of spikes. Maybe that's the ideal. So those are some different ways that we can filter this data. And I think it's better to do it in TouchDesigner because we can actually see the changes here in real time, make different decisions about values in the filter or in these other operators. So it's better than trying to figure it out in code with the Arduino, I think. We also, maybe I want this in inches or feet. I could do that calculation in the Arduino as well, or I can just say I'm going to do it here, right? So maybe I use a math chop and say that this should actually be maybe multiplied by, well, let me Google and see what it would be. Centimeters to inches. Okay, so multiply it by this number, or divide it by 2.54. I mean, that was silly. I should have just known that. But we can, well, okay, I should bring that back because there isn't a divide here. There's only a multiply, I think. So centimeters to inches formula. Multiplying it by this should do it. So here we've got math and we will multiply by that. So now we've got the number in inches instead, which seems to be right. I'm moving my hand really close. It's 2 inches or so. Doesn't change this much. I think I could, of course, I need to do the filter again, but I might do that before the math. Depends how I want to deal with it. So this is, all a lot easier than maybe looking at code for some people. So we could try that out. I think there is one more interesting one that doesn't necessarily help us in this situation, but is kind of an interesting option. So there's a spring which adds some bounce to it. So I'm just sitting still. It's getting my chest right now, but if I put my hand in front of there, you'll see that it actually causes a bounce, like a bouncing ball that follows that change. And then you can see it's kind of slowly flattening out, but you can change that by changing the springing and damping so that it actually is maybe more or less, or the duration of it is shorter. But that's a pretty cool option. Doesn't help us in this case, but that's the kind of thing that would be incredibly hard to do, I think, with in code in the Arduino as compared to doing it here by just dropping in an operator. Okay, I hope that helps come up with some different ways that you can deal with data coming from a sensor and having it become a different kind of continuous signal in TouchDesigner.